Hey everyone, David Aragona here, kicking off another season of the TimeformUS Road to the Derby series. This is the first video in a line of Derby preps that I'll be handicapping leading up to the first Saturday in May, and we're going to kick things off this week with the Fairgrounds Road to the Kentucky Derby, and that begins on Saturday. Race 13 at Fairgrounds is the Grade 3 Lecomte, 20 Derby qualifying points on the line to the winner of this race, 10 to second, 6 to third, and then on down. Mile and the 16th is the distance of this first in a string of two-turn Derby preps at Fairgrounds for the 3-year-olds. And as you can see from the morning line, two horses likely to attract the bulk of support in this race, those being the number 2 Nash and the number 7 Track Phantom. They faced off in the local prep for this when they were each at the end of their 2-year-old seasons in the Gunrunner Stakes, run just 4 weeks prior to this. And Track Phantom, the winner that day over Nash, who was the heavy favorite coming into that race. So it's going to be interesting to see how the public approaches this one, if they go for Nash again or if they respect that last out victory in which Track Phantom did beat him. You'll note that Brad Cox has entered 3 runners in this race, Nash leading that list. My colleague Marcus Hirsch did report that the number 8 Awesome Road likely to scratch from this race. He's cross-hunted in a race at Turfway, but I think Marcus reporting that he's unlikely to run either of these races, so something to take note of if you're handicapping this race along with me. And before we get to the main contenders, let's take a look at the TimeformUS pace projector for this race. And it's going to be interesting to see how these two that are shown in front sort themselves out on the lead. Even though Nash is shown on the front end, that's due to the fact that he's coming out of some faster paced races overall than Track Phantom. But Nash has really only led in one race. That was his maiden victory 2 back. And Track Phantom is just more of a confirmed front-running type. So I would imagine there's going to be more intention from Joel Rosario on Track Phantom to go to the lead. So I'd be more inclined to handicap him as the likely leader in this race as opposed to Nash. But the runner on the inside for Brad Cox definitely has the positional speed to get forward in this race. Also interested to see what we get from the number 1 Next Level. He dueled through some fast fractions in the Gunrunner last time, but he's taking blinkers off for this race, which is noted in the pace projector. So potentially he won't show quite as much early speed this time. And with that, we'll take a look at Next Level's past performances in TimeformUS. And he's just going to have to get a little bit faster to get on terms with the horses that defeated him in the Gunrunner. I thought that this horse showed some potential during his 2-year-old season. Even as a maiden, they thrust him right into Grade 1 Stakes Company in California last year, and he didn't run that badly, checking in third in the Del Mar Futurity, and it's easy to make an excuse for his American Pharaoh, where he stumbled very badly at the start of that race and basically lost all chance. He ran pretty well to break his maiden 2 back at Fairgrounds, going this mile in the 16th distance, but was beating a weaker field that day. The race did not come up particularly fast. Last time out, I thought that David Cullen was maybe overly aggressive with him. He didn't break as sharply as some others from the rail, and he was really hustled hard from that inside post to get to share the lead with Track Phantom into the first turn. Just could not go at the same pace that rival was setting and faded very badly at the end. I think that this horse has some upside, but I'm just not sure that this is the right spot for him given how tough the competition is. Once again, the number 2 is Nash, and he's the beaten favorite from that Gunrunner. He finished third that day, was a visually impressive winner of his maiden race 2 back at Churchill Downs, drawing off by over 10 lengths, earning a flashy 112 TimeformUS speed figure for that performance. And it's understandable why he was bet down to be such a heavy favorite off that impressive victory, but he wasn't able to carry that momentum forward. They tried rating tactics last time after he had gone gate to wire in that maiden victory, and not that he was overly ranked, but he just didn't seem to be traveling quite as comfortably through the early stages of that race as he was in that maiden win just prior to that. And he traveled into the race well around the far turn, but once he came under pressure, he was just sort of one pace through the stretch and was never really a threat to Track Phantom. We'll see if he has more to offer this time, if they try to change up the running style, potentially showing a little bit more tactical speed. He was pretty impressive at his most recent workout for this race, which was in company with the older horse, Saudi Crown, who's also slated to run on the Saturday card at the Fairgrounds. So not going to be a surprise if Nash puts forth a better effort, especially going out for the dangerous Brad Cox stable. Number 3, Tizzy Indie, going to be a big price in this race. Another horse going out for the Keith DeSormo Bard. Just looks a cut below these from a speed figure and from a class standpoint. He won his maiden race 3 back against $20,000 maiden claimers, a much lower level than this, and was really even facing a weaker group when he was second against Starter Allowance Company 2 back. So he would be a big, big surprise in this Lecomte. Next up is the number 4 Can Group. Let's take a look at his last victory in the Grade 2 Bourbon Stakes at Keeneland back in October of last year. This was his prep for the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf, and Can Group puts in a pretty electrifying stretch run in this race. He turns last past the quarter pole into the stretch, slices his way through the pack, and once he gets into the clear, he really finishes powerfully to run down this field to the wire, just getting up to win by a nose at 27-1 this day. Came back in the Breeders' Cup and was a big price in that race too, going off at 18-1 against that international field, and actually ran pretty well, all things considered. Got a similar kind of trip, reserved towards the back early, had to swing widest of all into the stretch that day, but he was really firing through the lane, was never a threat to the winner, unquestionable, but he was running on best of all at the end of that race to get up for fourth, only beaten about 3/4 of a length out of the second place spot. Now, looking at his pedigree as he tries to switch back to the dirt, there is some dirt in there, especially on the dam side. He's a half to a horse named Flat Out Speed, who was much more of a dirt horse, but that one was by Flat Out. Can Group is by Good Samaritan, and looking up some of the stats for Good Samaritan and the DRF Formulator sire statistics, he's had much more success as a turf sire overall, really hasn't had much success whatsoever as a dirt route sire, so I'm a little bit skeptical of Can Group carrying that improved turf form back to the dirt, but he definitely adds an intriguing layer to this race, given the fact that he does have that class coming out of the Breeders' Cup. The number 5 is Ethan Energy. He is another Brad Cox trainee in this race, and just looked like a horse that needed his debut sprinting, was off a little bit slowly, outrun every step of the way, trying to pick his way through the pack while taking kickback. Not a big surprise that he was able to improve with the stretch out and distance last time. He was much more engaged early, racing in mid-pack, and he made a pretty decisive move coming around the far turn to take over off the top of the stretch, showed a nice turn of foot to make that run to the lead past the 3/16 pole at Fairgrounds, going this distance last time, and then opened up pretty easily to the wire. Not really sure he was facing the toughest field that day, but the 103 TimeformUS speed figure is not that far below some of the horses coming out of the gun runner, so this horse definitely has some potential going out for the Brad Cox stable. The number 6 is Lat Long. Let's take a look at his most recent start when he broke his maiden at Oaklawn Park in the middle of December. And this was a nice step forward for this horse because he showed improved tactical speed through the middle portions of this race, made a nice move to take over coming to the top of the stretch. But you can see right here, he's getting a little bit greedy. He was hanging on his left lead, actually ducked into the rail briefly and maybe may have made contact with it, losing significant momentum and almost giving the race away to his stablemate before he's able to find his stride again and put that rival away coming onto the wire. I think this is a horse that's still figuring things out for Ken McPeak. He's faced some good runners along the way, including Dornock, who went on to win the Remsen, and then two-back when he was easily beaten by Track Phantom. But he did finish well for second that day, so Lat Long definitely a horse that gets the distance, and we'll see if he can take that step forward from a speed figure standpoint in this Lecomte. The number 7 is Track Phantom, who is the morning line favorite in this race, and he was the gun runner winner in his local prep for this. And this horse has just been on a very steady schedule since he made his debut for trainer Steve Asmussen. He's basically been running every 4 weeks like clockwork since beginning his career on October 1st of last year, and he's actually been improving with every start. Ran well to nearly break his maiden second time out, was an impressive winner over Lat Long in that mile and a 16th maiden race at Churchill Downs two-back, and then took that next step forward last time, showing a new dimension because he had controlled some pretty moderate paces in his prior starts against Maiden Company. But as I said, he got real pressure in the early stages of that gun runner from today's rival Next Level and just flicked that one away coming around the far turn, opened up into the stretch, and still found more to hold off a closer like runner-up Snead, as well as today's rival Nash. That 114 TimeformUS speed figure, that makes him one of the top players on the Kentucky Derby trail that we've seen so far. And if he repeats that number, he's going to be pretty tough to beat in here. Just seems like a horse that has been right on schedule, firing off consistent races and workouts, and I expect him to show up with another good performance on Saturday. The number 8 is Awesome Road. As I mentioned at the top of this preview, he's likely to scratch from this race. We'll see if Brad Cox decides to reverse course on that and start 3 runners in here. But he was a horse who impressed on debut, but since then has been pretty disappointing in a couple of stakes tries. So not going to spend too much time on him, given the fact that he is unlikely to participate. So let's throw out my picks for this Grade 3 Lecomte Stakes. And I'm not going to get too creative here. I was really impressed with that last out victory by Track Phantom, overcoming race dynamics to win that race pretty soundly, defeating his main rival, the number 2 Nash. Potentially Nash could take a step forward here, but I'm still waiting to see him run that explosive race from a rating tactics that he did when he was able to set the lead, set the pace on debut. And I'm not sure that he's going to be able to get the lead from Track Phantom in this race. So it's the number 7 Track Phantom for me over the number 2 Nash, with a little bit of the long shot, the number 6 Lat Long underneath. But that's a look at the Grade 3 Lecomte, the first in a series of Derby preps that we'll be covering on this TimeformUS Road to the Derby series in 2024.